our first guest, a gentleman by the name of Sheldon Day. Sheldon, how are you doing this evening?
Well, good evening, Bill. Thank you for inviting me.
We are pleased to have you on. For our viewers that don't know who you are, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and how you got into this Planet X maelstrom?
Well, starting back in the early 90s, I started getting interested in all this UFO stuff and abductions. I had been studying that up until mid or late 2007. I had been listening to John Moore's show on Republic Broadcasting Network and also following some of Professor Jim McCanney's work, and they were talking about this Planet X thing, and it was really starting to interest me. And it was actually John Moore that brought me to the realization that there is indeed a Planet X object that is inbound at this time. John Moore also had John DiNardo on as a guest from time to time, and John put me in touch with John DiNardo, and we've become very close friends. All my research is indicating that this is indeed what's happening. This explains a very bizarre behavior being exhibited by our government officials at this time. I mean, they're spending money like there's no tomorrow, and they've been setting up these seed storage vaults around the world. NASA's been spending billions and billions of dollars on all these telescopes. Why do they have the South Pole Telescope down in Antarctica, which is the coldest place on the planet, far, far away from major population centers? Well, the reason for that is because the former supervising astronomer of the U.S. Naval Observatory, Robert S. Harrington, who us Planet X researchers suspect was murdered, had put out information that Planet X was coming in to our solar system from the deep south. And, well, this is why they have the South Pole Telescope down in Antarctica.
Okay. So, when did you get interested in this? When did you start doing your own show and really getting into this aspect of the science?
I would say it was about maybe the middle or towards the end of 2009. I just keep listening to what John Moore was putting out on it. But John Moore says that Planet X is like 4 times the size of the Earth. That was actually disinformation put out for the public because they don't want people to know that this thing is much more massive. It's actually a brown dwarf star. And even Robert Harrington, the supervising astronomer of the U.S. Naval Observatory, had to feed some disinformation because otherwise he probably figured his life would have been threatened. Robert Harrington said that this thing will be coming in between the constellations of Scorpius and Sagittarius, which is roughly anywhere from, if you look at it, visualize the celestial sphere out there, coming in anywhere between right ascension 14 and 21 hours, and Harrington said roughly right ascension 18 hours is more like it. And here the elites have researchers looking out by the sun. They have them looking at other places. Well, the elites have hopelessly corrupted the sky viewing databases, so people stay confused as to where it's really coming in, but it's not Orion. They're trying to tell us it's Orion, but it's not the constellation of Orion.
Well, to simplify it for the for the average person, if you were, say, standing on the equator, and the Earth was maybe the size of your house, and you're standing on the equator, what direction would you be looking in? Would you be looking south? Would you be looking north?
Yeah, I believe at this time of the year, it's I think in the southeastern part of the sky, if memory serves correct.
Have you heard about the effects that are going on with the sun? Have you heard? I've seen some news stories over the past few weeks that scientists are, quote unquote, puzzled about some of the effects that they're seeing with our sun. And I myself, I'm wondering if this might be related to the incoming Planet X, which the things that scientists are seeing is that the core of the sun is shrinking faster than they thought it was. There's a new type of solar particle that appears to be affecting the carbon-14 and pretty much all matter, and the sun is cooling and weakening all at the same time. Have you heard anything about that?
Oh yes, I've heard a lot. First of all, they're under-reporting the daily ultraviolet readings that they're feeding the masses out there. It's actually maybe 3, 4, or 5 points higher than what they're telling us, because there's a breach in the Earth's magnetic field that was discovered, I think, in 2007 by NASA's fleet of Themis spacecraft. That magnetic hole around the Earth is 10 times more than what they previously thought. Mm-hmm. And this is the primary reason the elites are going underground is because of the solar scorching that they're fearful of. Because when Planet X comes in, it's going to cause the sun to flare out at some point. And another thing that they're not properly reporting is NASA was expecting this solar max to occur in 2012 or 2013. I think the latest one they put out was 2013. Well, the solar max actually occurs every 11 and a half years when Jupiter is at its closest point to the sun, and that actually happened back in March of this year when Jupiter was at its closest point to the sun. So there's a lot of misinformation being put out there because they just don't want us to know how bad it's going to get, of course. And also in the movie Knowing, I believe that movie Knowing, where it shows the Earth being scorched at the end, that's that movie with Nicolas Cage. Mm-hmm. I believe the producers of that film are subtly trying to warn the public what they know is going to eventually happen.
All right. We have our other guest calling on the landline. Go ahead and hang up the phone. We have our one of our producers is on the phone with our second special guest.
All right, I'm going to hang up now. He's going to get to you, John. All right.
Did you want me to continue, Bill, while you work?
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead and continue. We were talking about the new particles that are coming from the sun, the fact that the core is shrinking faster than what the scientists had thought it would, and the cooling and weakening of the sun, and how Planet X may play into that. So you can go ahead and continue that while we attempt to continue to get our other guest.
Yeah, I'm suspecting, Bill, these are cover stories that the establishment is putting out because they don't want us to know how bad the sun is going to get at some point. You know, they show us these various apocalyptic scenarios on these motion picture films. I think it's because the elites themselves don't even know how bad things are going to get.
Okay, here we go. Is this John DiNardo?
Yes, speaking.
You are on the air with Sheldon Day and me, Bill Zam.
Hi, Bill. It's a pleasure being with you and Sheldon.
Yes. Sheldon and I were just attempting to sound professional while we're on the air and getting you on the call as well. We were just talking about the observations of the sun that the astronomers have been having recently, where the core of the sun is shrinking faster than they thought. There's a new type of solar particle that appears to be mutating matter, and the sun is going into a cooling and weakening cycle, while all the while Planet X is coming in. And we were getting Sheldon's thoughts on that, and you can chime in at any time.
Oh, okay. I had been following the latest developments with the sun. The sun has gone through maybe 2 years ago, around 2009. The sun went through an extraordinary, record-breaking period of quietness, where the number of sunspots and flares was less than it had ever been practically throughout recorded history. And it was quite a worrisome situation. And I had theorized the only reason for this, at a time when we were expecting the sun to become hyperactive. The only reason for this would be that Planet X and its incoming gang of comets were passing through close enough to Jupiter to cause Planet X and Jupiter to discharge to one another, and that would reduce the interaction between the normal interaction between Jupiter and the Sun.
And hey John, to further back up your assertion there, back in 2009 we had an amateur astronomer down in Australia observe two separate events where asteroids were smashing into Jupiter, so that corresponds to what John's talking about there.
Right, and it was around July 20th, actually on July 20th of 2009, that Australian amateur astronomer Anthony Wesley photographed a comet crashing into the southern hemisphere of Jupiter during that extraordinary period of solar quiescence. And this is an extraordinary event, to see a comet crashing into Jupiter. It's not like it's something that can be, that comet crash into Jupiter can be associated with Planet X, very likely, because prior to that, they had rarely seen comets crashing into Jupiter. In fact, it was so unusual that the famous comet Shoemaker-Levy, its crash into Jupiter occurred back in the 90s, I believe, in the late 1990s. And that was an historic event. And, well, incidentally, too, that was Eugene Shoemaker's wife, Carolyn, who had cited that comet crash. And just as an incidental point, many who have been following the subject believe that her husband, Dr. Eugene Shoemaker, a famed, worldwide famous geologist, was murdered in an accident, an automobile accident in Australia, I believe. Eugene Shoemaker was giving speeches to many scientists around the world about the increasing number of comets that were coming into our solar system and menacing Earth. And the power elite were doing everything they could to keep